Hey everybody, welcome to the Cosmic Dispatch. I'm your host, Corey Nakasue, and today we are going to be talking about the wild month of March, featuring Venus's retrograde through Aries and Pisces. I've already talked a lot about Aries and Pisces last month, and maybe even the month before that, but there's more. In fact, all the way up until the beginning of June, the the big stories are in Aries and Pisces down the line. Um, so you're going to just get more Aries and Pisces content. I'm going to do a quick forecast for March and break down Venus's retrograde, but I will also touch on the myriad influences going on this month. There's a lot. So, when I talk to other astrologers, the sentiment seems to be, okay, so there's the astrology of 2025, and then there's the astrology of March. This is a very, very pivotal month. Actually, I would even say the whole spring, March through the beginning of June. There are big, big stories across the Pisces Aries border. Pisces being the 12th zodiac sign, the last stop, and Aries being the first zodiac sign. And I will get more into that particular point in the zodiac, 0 degrees Aries, towards the end, because that's just one of so many things going on this month. Um, I'm if you're watching this on YouTube, I know most of you listen, but for those of you who watch this on YouTube, I had to scribble out some notes for myself today. These are very incoherent times, and I do not want to contribute to the prevailing confusion, chaos, and fuzziness. I'm going to try to do my Aries best to provide some tools for clarity. And even though, so in last month's episode, um, I did a whole treatment of Pisces, and I'm still going to talk about Pisces today, but more in relationship to Aries, since in March we move into Aries season. We have the spring equinox on March 20th. And so I will be talking about Aries a little bit more. And also, I feel very equipped to talk about Aries since I have a lot of experience with Aries. Personally, I get to be an Aries spokesperson today. Personally, I have 5 bodies in Aries, all clumped together, um, between like 10 degrees and 13 degrees. And one of those planets is the sun. So so I'm biased, of course. I have lived my whole life dealing with my own many experiences with Aries energy. So yeah, you'll be getting it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. A lot of talk about Aries. So what was I gonna say? See, I'm already moving away from my notes. Um, so I'm gonna break that down. I'll touch on all the things that are going on, or most of the things that are going on in that tight area of the zodiac, which is the last degrees of Pisces and up to about 10 degrees of Aries. Um, I truly believe that the next 2 months are the most pivotal of the year. Not that the rest of 2025 is placid by any stretch of the imagination, but this month holds, just to give you a little taste, it holds Venus's retrograde through Aries and Pisces, 2 eclipses one on the Aries Libra axis, the other on the Pisces Virgo axis. So we have more action there. Mercury's retrograde through Aries and Pisces, and Neptune's first ingress into Aries. And then all the other dynamics that that creates makes this month a month of huge sweeping changes, rapid fire changes. And yes, I know that January and February were like chock full of a lot of change and a lot of initiations, but I really believe Mars is going to blow a lot of minds. So if you're feeling like your mind has already been blown to smithereens and like you're just dying to put it back together, I think our efforts are going to be more, how do I say this, better suited towards not trying to, I think I've said this before, not trying to falsely put something together so that we can just say, like, okay, I know what's going on, or I know what I'm going to do. I have a clear picture, when you actually don't. It's to learn how to get comfortable and learn how to be in this new environment of rapid change, reversal, chaos, and limited understanding. There are limits on clarity right now that all the research in the world aren't going to help clarify, because narratively and materially things are breaking down. So when you go and try to home in on something that you want definitive evidence of, it's not there. It has disintegrated. And there's not a lot to be done with that. There's a lot of opportunity for wasted effort in March and April. And partially because, one of the Aries drives is to act and do something. And it's hard to take definitive action on something when you're unclear about what's really going on. You can't even really decide on the best course of action to take because you're not clear on the situation, or something's being hidden. And that's what we're in right now. But with Aries, sometimes the level of impatience and the need to do something, do anything, just to off gas that impulse and that pressure could, again, have us just wasting a lot of energy. And that's like best case scenario. We could end up causing a lot of strife and destruction for nothing. And then we have more of a mess to clean up. Like, that's exactly what we need, right? So yeah, I'll be talking about that and much, much more. If you like this content, that sounds like such a, I don't think I'm like a content creator. I wouldn't label myself as such. If you like, these musings or whatever, yeah, like and subscribe. We're on all the streaming platforms. We're on YouTube, and you can get updates on new episodes on Instagram, either at Body Intel or the Cosmic Dispatch. You can sign up for our newsletter. Links are in the show notes down below. And my books for consultation are open. This includes small group chart interpretation workshops, and that has a rolling registration. We also have, when I say we, I'm talking about my collaborator, Shay in the Catskills. We have a workshop coming up. There's about 1 week left to register for that. And it's about Venus's retrograde through Aries and Pisces. It's called Beyond Love and Strife because even though we're dealing with Mars and Venus, um, you know, Mars and Venus are about so much more than trying to get along with each other or we're going to fight. Like the the histories and the stories of Mars and Venus are huge. Like we're doing a 4 week workshop. That's gonna scratch the surface, but it will get you thinking bigger about what Mars does, what Venus does, what Aries is about, what is Pisces about, and what is their relationship to each other when we have these bodies moving back and forth between those two signs for such an extended period of time. What else? So so that's happening. You have about 1 week left to register. That starts on March 9th, and we still have some spots available. And also, speaking of my work with Shay, we've also been doing these very special readings called the correspondence. It's an astro reading and a tarot reading of your natal chart, and we collaborate and build a story together about what we're seeing in the chart. And for those of you who didn't know, um, the the language and the imagery of the tarot has a strong relationship with the language and imagery of astrology. And this has been codified. This has been practiced for centuries. But that's something a lot of people don't know, that the two can comment on each other really beautifully. It's one of my favorite readings to do. It is packed. It is packed with info. The way Shay and I work, and we work together really well. Um, like we both have a lot of cardinal energy, um, and so that creates a situation where we get a lot done in a little bit of time, and it's very focused, and there's a lot of information. There's not a lot of filler. We both do a pretty good job of assessing, you know, things that have been expressed before. There's a lot of content out there that has become, because of its ubiquity, kind of meaningless, which is what happens with language when we start when we start using it as a placeholder for things instead of really thoughtfully creating new ways to articulate things. And then we say, words like, one of my least favorite words, even though I use it once in a while, I try not to. Like, let's take the word manifest, right? People be manifesting all over the place. Um, to like stay away from just saying a word like that and assuming, yeah, okay, we know what that's about. Or another word, especially in, these types of circles, like esoteric circles. Transformation. Well, every day is a transformation. What are you talking about? Um, we One of the things I really love about working with Shay, and where we have a lot of simpatico, is that we don't want to use the language that is warmed over during the reading. And this is a very Aries thing, actually. It's a process of discovery, even for the two of us, as we're creating this story arc, as we're creating this character. And so it's one of my favorite things to do because it involves, an interesting amount of teamwork, creative language, and building, and then also working with this symbology. It's very special. You can book those, and we'll usually have a recording delivered to you within about 2 weeks. And so those are fun. Those are available. Also, in my other life, I am a physio and somatic therapist. And I wrote an article recently for Mindfield Bulletin about my practice and the role narrative plays in embodied experience. It's a paywalled journal, but if you email me, I can send you a copy. And that's that. Let's just jump into this. I'm going to read today. So, as I've been trying to figure out a way to deliver this material since I was doing the radio show a year or two ago. I'm using the the writing that I've already used for Chronogram magazine with the monthly forecast and horoscopes and my astrology 101 series to kind of give me um, a foundation for the podcast. And that helps me stay coherent because left to my own devices, and I'm weaving in some stories about Aries here. Um, I prefer to be spontaneous, and I think that's fine in like my personal life. But when I'm trying to delineate things that are very complex with language, I find it's helpful to have some what's the word I'm looking for? Thinking of things, landmarks, right? Like on a map. It's like you gotta at least hit this, you gotta hit this, you gotta talk about this. And then if I want to extrapolate, which I always do, I will. But it puts the pressure on me to be at least somewhat faithful to the structure. Because yeah, given my left to my own devices, who knows what I do? I hate planning. I hate preparing. I just kind of like to jump in and do it and see what happens. So trying to split the difference here. So on with the show. March 2025, I titled the monthly forecast Holy Wars and Love Bombs. Kind of sounds like something Robin would say to Batman, right? Holy Wars and Love Bombs, Batman. What are we going to do now? So I want to just explain this title even a little bit. The Holy Wars part, holy, I'm borrowing from Pisces, war, that's an easy Aries word. But what does it like what does holy war even mean? And it can mean a lot of things. Literally, I think we're about to collectively do battle with each other based on belief systems, worldviews, and ideologies. And individually, I also see that being part of the the content of whatever wars we're waging on each other and whatever wars we're waging within ourselves. The overarching narratives and all the systems that we have used to create meaning and belief are eroding. They are disintegrating. That is not a comfortable feeling. I think as humans, we want to feel like we are right and we are good and our lives are meaningful and we have purpose. Now, when the overarching narratives start to disintegrate, that kind of it messes with, again, like I was saying about Aries. Well, how do I be? What do I do? How do I act? Because I don't have the a foundational intact narrative that I can use to structure my life and the way I move through the world. And so when we don't have that and we're in search of it and we see other people who are searching for it as well and maybe they're coming up with different stories that challenge our personal story about why things are meaningful, why things are important, what's the right way to be, um, we will compete with each other because unfortunately in Aries there can only be one winner. and and this is part of the Aries Pisces fascinating situation right now. We still have bodies in Pisces. We have the North Node in Pisces right now, and there's one what there's a collection of rhetorics in Pisces that says things to the effect of we all need to come together and be in community, figure this out together, and move forward. And how that's lovely. And you know, I don't think I'm being pessimistic when I say this. I don't think that is going to happen. I do think we need each other right now. I do think we need to be helping each other, protecting each other, um, being kind with each other and working together. But I don't see that happening. I see factions of people collecting, getting ready to do war with each other and battle it out over even the right way to move forward. Um, Even within these little communities of people, I see a lot of backbiting. I see a lot of turning on each other. I see a lot of calling out and criticism. It's like you're not advocating for peace the right way. You're not fighting the right way. Um, and because you don't do that, I don't want to work with you because you're different from me. And then here we bring in Aries. The ruling planet of Aries is Mars. One of the major things Mars does is it cuts. And so when I think of, like cancel culture and, people dismissing each other based on, what their label is, like what do you call yourself? Again, based on belief. If it's different, I ain't even gonna fuck with you. Like I'm sticking to my tribe. And that's a little nod to Mars in Cancer, which is also happening. I'm gonna try to stay away from. I talked a little bit about that in the last episode. That is another major thing. But anyway, but that's part of this Aries Pisces mess of people thinking, trying to work together. Oh, but not just with anybody, not if you're different. And I think there's a problem there. Um, and since I started with this whole narrative thing, if if on a daily basis you find that the people that you surround yourself with, that you're mostly in agreement, and you're not having a lot of friction right now, you're not having a lot of discussions or even arguments, you might be in a bubble. And if you're in a bubble, that means you are cutting yourself off from people who seem different. And that kind of blows a hole in like the Pisces ideal of togetherness, unity, oneness. And so yeah, this is it's a sloppy time. I'm even like getting very sloppy talking about this. But so holy wars, all kinds of holy wars. Um and I want to say something else about Pisces transition into Aries. You know, if Pisces is the last stop where the totality of experience culminates in Pisces, it's everything. Nothing is excluded. To the beginning of the zodiac, Aries, where you have the singular, right now can be experienced as all of the narrative stories, beliefs, the things to have faith in, the things that create meaning are disintegrating, right? That's what water does. It just kind of erodes whatever is solid and material. And that's what Pisces does at the end of winter. If you think about, you know, what's around you. Like I live in the Hudson Valley in New York. So everything's frozen right now. If it's liquid, it's frozen. But if you think to what things look like around you, especially if you're living close to nature, when around March, where some of the things that were icy start to melt and things start to break apart, that's what Pisces does. It gets things moving from the solid experience of Aquarius, the dead of winter, the ice cube. Pisces starts to melt things because it's getting ready for Aries, the spring, for things to be born. And so we might have this feeling right now with so much activity in that space that things are collapsing into a single point of focus. So if Pisces is everything and nothing, you can't even point to that. Aries is this specific spot right here. That is what I'm looking at. This is the thing. We're collapsing into something very definitive, not anytime soon, but that's the process. Some people might rush it, some people might be like trying not to get there. But that's it. This kind of ubiquity and yeah, I'll just say ubiquity collapsing into a definitive singular point. And no one knows what that point is yet. And that's up to us. Like astrology is not going to tell us what's going to happen. That's not its job. Um so yeah. And so yeah, people fighting over meaning. Um Another thing about this particular time, you know, Pisces is also about swimming, thinking about the fish that represent Pisces. They are like swimming up to the light of the equinox of spring. There's there's this quality of feeling with the end of Pisces that's almost like how I imagine, being pregnant is, or even like people who have never had children. I think we all know what it's like to be pregnant with a feeling, or pregnant with an idea, or pregnant with an expression, and what it feels like when you're right at the gate of being able to collapse into that single point, for it to be born, for it to exist. In Pisces, Pisces is kind of the amniotic fluid that we swim in before we're born. Like, we don't exist as a singular individual yet when we're still attached to our moms, and we're like literally floating in liquid. It's when we get that first breath of fresh air with our own lungs. That's Aries. So that's kind of the feeling of what what March might feel like. And then do we rush, that birth? Do we force that labor, or do we like resist coming out because whatever reason, we're scared, we're confused, we don't know how? Those are the types of things that I think are on the table for March and April. um yeah, I'm pondering right now if I want to talk about narratives just a little bit more, and how important they are, and how we're having a breakdown of narratives, which makes it hard to find meaning in whatever we think of as truth. um there's also, there's a there's a huge battle for narrative right now, and narrative is so important because, you know they who control the narrative kind of control the material reality. That's how strong stories and information are, mostly stories. But when we're also having a hard time getting information, real information, it's hard to build the stories, right? The data points, all these little, isolated data points need to be strung together to create a story. And stories are that powerful. And right now, I think there's a big battle for narrative. Again, talking about Aries, Pisces, ideology, and narrative. And that when we have a breakdown in narrative, and like, just study your history, I think this is definitively true, that a breakdown in narrative always precipitates a breakdown in the material reality. And you might be saying, well, then I guess the narrative broke down a long time ago because like things are like materially falling apart. Well, there's a long way to go before they completely materially fall apart. And the narrative hasn't quite broken down. I talk to a lot of people who are still clinging to that old narrative and really trying to make it work. And they think that the breakdown isn't a breakdown in the entire narrative. They're thinking that their narrative is like being taken away from them, and they have to fight to get it back so that things become right again. Right. And when I say people trying to make things right again, if you're, of that mindset, again, on all sides of all political spectrums. It's not just one group of people or one type of person trying to reach back and work that narrative so that it's effective. That there's a difference between that and a complete bottoming out of a larger narrative, like the big one, the big overarching narrative. Okay. I think that's all I'm going to say about that. And then there's the love bombs part, which that's pretty self-explanatory. Venus in Aries. It's love that feels like a bomb. And some people might really enjoy that. Um, when I think of, I'm going to talk a lot about Venus in Aries today. When I think of Venus in Aries, I think of love that has not been defanged. I think of love and passion that has not been neutered by a lot of structure and a lot of narrative and a lot of meaning. When we're working with Aries, it's what is immediate, what is what is providing the impulse for me to act and go after the things that I want. Not even like go after, just take it. Like, what is that? That Aries type of experience is being completely in the moment. Again, there's no planning. There's often no narrative. There's no announcement. There's no question. It's like the impulse and the reaching out to grab happen simultaneously. And so when we put Venus in Aries, like Venus, like yes, in some tellings, Venus, I think it's the Roman in Roman mythology, Venus is also a goddess of war. I'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. But Venus is still Venus. Venus still wants to do all the things that Venus wants to do. It wants to connect, it wants to create, it wants to attract and be attracted yeah, and and um and love and feel good. Like it's Venus just likes to feel good. And so how does Venus do these things in Aries? um it it doesn't, if Venus is flirting with you in, let's say, Taurus or Libra where it's at home, Venus is more likely to point out all the things that you have in common and might put a premium on being nice and pleasing and easy to be around. um, Maybe making you laugh, telling you a joke, um, just in general doing some nice things for you to build the connection. Venus in Aries is frictive, it's hot, and it's again immediate and is more likely to pull your pigtails or insult you or challenge you to uh, a push-up contest as a way not actually not to start a fight with you, but to make contact. um and for for a lot of you, Venusian people out there, like, wow, what's attractive about that? But Venus in Aries can be highly attractive and and get a lot done in that relationship space. It's just the way it's expressed. It has a lot more heat. It's more provocative. It's maybe more thrilling. There are probably risks involved. And yeah, Venus in Aries will excite and provoke. And maybe even at first experience of it, it might feel like you're being assaulted. But Venus in Aries, I think, wants to get your attention and wants to have that instant, um, high stakes connection, which through most other signs, again, it's comfortable in other signs. Venus likes to work her way up to it. So it's not jarring, right? It feels comfortable. And Venus in Aries doesn't care about comfort. So, yeah. I also think Venus in Aries, in reference to love bombs and love that can feel like a bomb, for better or worse, is something I've been hearing a lot in conversation and in sessions of people right now saying, no, I'm not going to argue with anybody. I'm going to take a break from, reading the news or going on social media because I need to protect my peace. I don't think Venus in Aries is going to allow that to happen. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. In these times, if you're putting a premium on protecting your peace, I would have to ask the question, um, why do you get to protect your peace when anything, there's nothing peaceful going on out in the world? There's nothing peaceful going on with a whole lot of people in this world. And so why do you get to opt out? You might say something for my physical health, for my mental health, and I totally get that. um, there's not a lot we can do if we're all spun out and anxious and fearful. But again, like I was saying earlier, I think the better course of action is to learn how and grow ourselves so that we can confront a lot of these things. And if you look back at all the times we've been here before in history, anytime there has been a major shift in the overarching narrative, it wasn't made by a group of people who had slept very well, ate very well, made sure that, they were feeling peaceful and regulated. And then from that place, you know, organized or fought to create change. I don't think that's what happened. I think people were agitated to the point of needing to take action, strung out, tired, angry, under resourced. And no, I don't think that's the way it should be. But looking back at history, people don't seem to launch themselves into action until they're forced to, until they get so uncomfortable. But if they're in a place where they can like opt out to protect their peace, I don't know if they're going to launch themselves into action ever. And so this is a question I think these times are going to raise for people to reckon with, ask themselves. Yeah, like that always hits me in interesting ways because I hear that a lot. It's like, oh, I'm just I can't engage with that. I need to protect my peace. It's like, how nice for you. Actually, if you have the option of protecting your peace, that means that you have some resources to work with to maybe do some harder work and get things done. Just a thought. Okay. And so now with that, I'm just going to launch into the short forecast of March. And here we go. March always shares the signs of Pisces and Aries. The end of winter meets the start of spring. The equinox arrives on the 20th. This particular March installs a revolving door for Venus and Mercury to enter and exit both signs multiple times for approximately 2 months. Venus retrograde in Aries at the first of the month, and Venus stations retrograde in Aries at the first of the month and prepares for her underworld journey. For 40 days and 40 nights, the planet of consensus and pleasure will dig deep into her heart and psyche to redefine her values, desires, and attachments. In Aries, Venus values her sovereignty. But by the time she backtracks into Pisces on March 27th, she'll begin to question how much independence she truly needs. Mercury enters headstrong Aries on March 3rd and prepares for its retrograde journey on the 15th. Words stab like daggers for a few weeks before Mercury backs into poetic Pisces on the 29th. This back and forth movement over these two signs describes a desire to take decisive actions based on faith. This could result in crusader-like heroism, collective acts of protest, collective acts of delusion, or martyrdom in the name of higher forms of love and justice. On March 14th, a total lunar eclipse occurs in Virgo. This eclipsed full moon that sits opposite the Sun and Saturn in Pisces might burst some bubbles of hope and faith. I want to talk about just a little bit about this lunar eclipse. It's a total lunar eclipse in Virgo. So you have the sign of Virgo, which is opposite Pisces. Virgo is it's an earth sign. It's very interested in what is useful, what is not useful, what works and what doesn't, and what do we need to fix to make something work or even make it optimal. And also, what do we need to cut out? And usually what Virgo wants to cut out is anything that's taking up space, or even things that are like malnutritious for whatever, the endeavor is. It will cut it out. Like Virgo symbolizes like the digestive processes. It's like, this is nutritious, this is not. And Virgo can be very ruthless about just cutting things out. I work with a lot of editors, and when I think about Virgo, I think about like this ruthless pruning of anything that's getting in the way of the absolute best parts of a manuscript, or like some other like work of art, which is usually represented by Pisces. And the fact that it's opposite Saturn in Pisces, Saturn is another force for, no, we're cutting that out. Get real. So to have Virgo and Saturn there in the mix during this eclipse is wherever we have overdone the Pisces imagination, wherever we have overdone the Pisces desire to transcend, Virgo and Saturn are going to be like, hey, wake up. We want reality. Is this doable in a human body on Earth? Can you like please come down and land? And so if there's been a little too much, I'm hoping for change. I'm praying for change. I have faith that somehow things will magically change. I think you might get a swift kick in the butt during that lunar eclipse. And I also mean this collectively. Like, I think we're all kind of walking around scratching our heads going, wait, what? I thought I thought this was happening. No, it's not happening. Was did I imagine that, or did I miss something? Um, and so that can be good. The upshot is that we'll learn exactly what steps we should take to firm up wobbly intentions or flimsy plans. On March 29th, a partial solar eclipse in Aries urges us to pursue our desires honestly, nakedly, and directly. I also want to add immediately. That's like really key for Aries. In Aries, there is no time like the present. For better or worse, we're less concerned with the consequences of our actions. Finally, on the 30th, nebulous Neptune makes its first ingress into Aries, beginning a long process of glorifying and complicating all that is martial and individualistic. That Neptune ingress on the 30th is huge. Neptune spends 14 years in a sign. So Neptune is very, very close to being finally done with Pisces. That is going to be a sea change, pun intended. Um, what else can I say about Aries and Pisces? A lot. I know in last month's episode, I talked about Aries and Pisces with regard to the book and the film Fight Club. And because I'm doing so much goddamn astrology right now, I can't I can't even like watch things without circling some of this material. And so I'm actually a big fan of Cobra Kai, the TV show, which I binged and finished already. And of course, I just kept thinking, oh my God, this is so Pisces and Aries. And even if you haven't seen, it's kind of a silly show. Like, but one of the things I really like about it and that I respect about it is it knows what it is. It knows it accepts and plays with its own corniness really, really well. Um, but if you haven't been watching Cobra Kai, I'm sure a lot of you remember the Karate Kid franchise. So and and if you don't know what I'm talking about, then just bear with me for a couple seconds. But when I think about Cobra Kai and Karate Kid, I think about um, Miyagi-Do, which was Mr. Miyagi's style of karate in the Karate Kid, being very Piscean. You know, it's a holistic practice. It's a responsive practice where when you're fighting with your opponent, it's not even really like fighting with your opponent. It's kind of like this odd collaboration with your opponent. You're actually kind of working with your opponent. You cannot do Mr. Miyagi's style of karate if you see your opponent as separate from you. You know, the Miyagi Do style is it's holistic. You're working with this other person in this whole dance, which is another very Piscean thing, dance. Um, and then you look at the style of Cobra Kai, which their motto is strike first, strike hard, no mercy. And their style is based on being aggressive. And it's right there in the motto, strike first. Like you do see your opponent as someone separate from you to be attacked. And so, yeah, that's another. if you if you want to feel into some of this Pisces Aries situation, um, I would watch either Cobra Kai or revisit the Karate Kid. And also like that Miyagi-Do style reminds me a lot of Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do style of Kung Fu. Um, and he's even been quoted as, oh, there's a famous quote. It's like be water, my friend. And I've worked with you know, some of these quotes from Bruce Lee and some of the tenets of Jeet Kune Do when I've written about Pisces before. And it's that same sentiment. You're it's a martial art. And when I think about Aries and Pisces, that's, you know, that's what it is. You have the martial element from Aries and then the artistic element of Pisces, and then you have martial arts. Um, and what else can I say about like the nuts and bolts forecast for March? So we have two eclipses. We're going to enter eclipse season in March. And if you don't know anything about eclipse season, just scroll through some old episodes of the Cosmic Dispatch, and I've talked about eclipses up and down at different points during eclipse season. And so they're big, they're game changers. And I just want to express this because I haven't heard um, a lot of talk about this from other astrologers. Something I noticed in the series of eclipses that is Virgo and Pisces, there are no solar eclipses during that whole series. I don't know what that means, but it has my attention. We're going to find out what that means. If you have any ideas, like let me know because I'm very curious um, as to what that's about. Um, I'm also thinking about this these end degrees of Pisces and the North Node being in Pisces, even though there's not going to be any solar eclipses there during this eclipse series. I'm still really like fascinated by that. Like what else these late degrees of Pisces portend. And one of the things I've been thinking about is perverted spiritual practices, perverted religious practices, where, again, dealing with meaning, by the time we get to the end of Pisces, things become so disintegrated and they lose their meaning that like all the particular practices or tenets of these things like spirituality, religion, even occult practice are are up for grabs for people to then adopt and interpret on their own or turn into something else. And usually, we're turning some of these things back into fit the capitalist culture that we're in. And ideally, I think typically when we do these spiritual practices, religious practices, occult, esoteric practices, we engage them because they are outside secular practice, economic practice, political practice. They're different. But because capitalism is like this cannibalistic monster that eats everything and will eventually eat itself, as we see happening right now, that once you bring these practices into a capitalist culture, which when I say capitalist culture, I am not now also bringing in the political governmental culture because as we know, capitalism and the government involvement within capitalism is they are enmeshed. So when you bring these other practices, these practices that we usually think of being able to transcend what however we're organizing ourselves in material culture, when you bring them in, they get warped and perverted, and they don't serve the same purposes because now they're feeding a different machine, which is capitalism. And so I'm in these, I'm not in, honestly, a lot of religious spaces or even like traditionally spiritual spaces. I'm in a lot of academic spaces. um but I'm also in a lot of like occult and esoteric spaces. And these are things you can now do, as I do, um, as a job, as a career. And I've had so many conversations about this, and especially with the upcoming astrology, like we're ending a lot of like really big Pisces mojo for these things. And I've heard a lot of people who do these practices. They're like, what does this mean for having a career in occult practices, having a career in, you know, um, spirituality, religion? And I see that changing. I don't know how. I don't think anyone will ever stop doing these practices ever. No one, like the people who practice these things, they're going to practice them whether they are mainstream or capitalist products that you can buy or not. Like the people who are really doing it, like they're always going to do it. But the question is, are they going to fall from um, mainstream practice and consumption? And I think they might, because a lot of these practices, and then I'm going to include spirituality and religion here, once they jump into bed with capitalism and government practice, it's not the same thing. It, again, when I talk about the capitalist corporate cannibalism, I did not mean to make an alliteration. But when we talk about that, we're also talking about another C word, co-opting. And it's not, it again, it becomes defanged, it becomes neutered. It doesn't have any power once it becomes owned by this other set of values. So I think that's something we can be on the lookout for when we see quote unquote gurus and spiritual leaders um, start doing some very questionable things, just really gross, icky, stupid things, um, and turning different aspects of religion and spirituality into into a culture that's actually looking more and more like um, what we experience in capitalist culture and patriarchy, hierarchical, organization. I hope that made any sense. But yeah, that's something I see happening. Again, at those late degrees of Pisces, I don't know that this is going to be so mainstream anymore. Things like astrology, even though this is, yeah, this is really fascinating to me. I'm not sure how this is going to go, but it's something, something's going to shift there. Because also when I talk to particularly younger people, millennials, Gen Z, astrology and tarot especially, those have really been grabbed by the mainstream. It's become like the lingua franca of those generations. I can talk to just about any Gen Z person or millennial person, and especially in queer culture, and they'll throw all kinds of astrology and tarot terminology at me and use it well. Like they speak that language pretty well, and it just speaks to the enduring language of these like symbolic languages. Again, it will always be. Is it going to be a mainstream commodity? Are we going to see more of these you know esoteric colleges and corporations that exist now? um yeah, I don't know if the boom is over or what, but it's gonna turn into something, I think. um yeah, let me get back on track here. Do I want to get back on track? Yes, I do. Okay, I'm going to move on now to my Astrology 101 article. And it's about Venus retrograde. It's like the nuts and bolts of Venus retrograde. So this is, pertinent if you don't actually have a feeling for what that Venus process is about. And if you do, I don't know, you might get a slightly different take on it. So I called this piece individual emergence from a sea of consensus. And already, like when I wrote that title in my head, I was thinking about, you might be familiar with this painting, Botticelli's Birth of Venus, where it's a picture of Venus and she's in a half shell, and she's like coming out of the sea. Um, and I've heard descriptions of this piece of art as, the birth of Venus, born of sea spray. And she's, greeted by the hora of spring. And so that's very Venus in Aries to me. Um, Again, you have birth, which is Aries, and then being greeted by spring, and then also, being born of sea spray, emerging from the sea. And that's kind of how I'm seeing this Venus through Aries and Pisces back and forth situation going, that we have this, soupy sea of everything and all that is love, hate, war, strife, beauty, you know, disgrace, everything. It's everything. And out of that liquidy sea that you can't grasp emerges a being, and it's Venus. And also, being greeted by spring and being born allude to where am I going with this? I was just thinking that in this particular process of Venus retrograde, she is going to be moving into, once she makes her conjunction with the sun, she's going through a process of turning into a morning star. And a morning star phase of Venus is a lot more aggressive and, you know, extroverted. And some people would even say, oh, this is, Venus's warrior phase. And I keep hearing, these echoes of Venus in Aries when I think about Botticelli's Birth of Venus. What else? Yeah, in Aries, Venus is just much bolder, aggressive. I said all of that about Venus. Okay, so here it is. Venus, the planet that rules affections, agreements, aesthetics, and all expressions of worth, stands still in the sky in preparation for its retrograde. It's currently in the sign of Aries and will backtrack into Pisces, which means we'll have had Venus in one of those two signs for over 5 months. It finally leaves Aries for Taurus on June 6th. Typically, Venus only spends 3 to 4 weeks in a sign. When planets quote unquote turn retrograde, they don't actually change direction. It's an optical illusion due to where the planet is in its orbit. Symbolically, retrograde planets express themselves more erratically and with less coordination. They also emphasize specific time frames. A planet will appear to traverse a portion of the sky, go backwards over that same patch, and then resume its forward motion for a third pass over that same section. Retrogrades are a time of deep study of a particular curriculum. So, again, late Pisces, early to mid Aries, that patch of sky. And as I've been interjecting with a lot of asides and tangents, all of those things pertain to that patch of sky, late Pisces into early-ish Aries. Venus represents all that we find pleasing and all that we value. It represents the things, people, and situations that we want to get closer to and be in relationship with. Usually, when we desire connection with something or someone, we'll try to find ways to be in harmony with them or create situations that unite us using pleasure as a type of glue. It's the planet astrologers look to decipher what a person finds attractive, their priorities in relationships, and what makes a person feel fertile and abundant. Although Venus is the Roman goddess of love, to describe Venus's astrological function as just being about love excludes its myriad allusions to how we get along socially, economically, and creatively. So just in those three things, economically, socially, I'm thinking about Venus in Libra. Libra is Venus's home sign. Um, Economically, and I'm also going to include sensually on this one. That would be indicative of Venus in Taurus. That's Venus's other home sign. And then creatively, I'm thinking about Pisces, where Venus is exalted. So Libra, Taurus, and Pisces, those are Venus's favorite signs to be in. When Venus begins its retrograde motion, it can be experienced more as a descent than a reversal. It will begin to question why it wants what it wants, why it's in agreement with certain things, and if it likes certain people or circumstances that it used to. The last time Venus retrograded through this area of the sky was 2017. Some of the big stories or topics in your life from that time might get a reboot. So whatever was going on individually, right, in 2017 around this time, maybe not just a reboot, maybe a rehash, a revisit. If we if we expand this collectively, like this is a pretty on the nose easy one. In the winter/spring of 2017, we were dealing with a very similar situation that we're in now. It was like right after Trump's inauguration, and the like trying to figure out what that was about and what was going on. So I thought that was really interesting. Some of the big stories or topics in your life from that time might get a reboot. revisit, rehash. Again, remember, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. So we're moving, it's like a spiral, right? When we go back, we don't revisit the exact same things. It's we're spiraling back, we're circling back, and it's going to be some of the same things but presented differently. Venus retrograde periods can point to a changing of alliances, tastes, and value systems. Social codes, financial practices, relationship mores, and topics specific to women are also up for review. So, like one of the most basic things about Venus that I did not explicitly say, it's a feminine sign. That little symbol with the circle and like the plus sign, that's usually the symbol for the female. Um, this retrograde period is especially poignant for numerous reasons. Venus traverses both the sign of its detriment, Aries, and the sign of its exaltation, Pisces. It crosses the critical degree of 0 Aries, along with Mercury and Neptune within 4 days of each other multiple times. And all this occurs during a game-changing eclipse season on both the Aries, Libra, and Pisces, Virgo axes. It's enough to make your head spin. So I'll break this down a little more. While Venus is in Aries, so Venus entered Aries on February 4th. It will stay there till March 27th. And then it enters again on April 30th and will stay there until June 6th. While Venus is in Aries, it's less agreeable, less patient, and less thoughtful. Instead of looking for balance and points of connection, it's more contrary, impulsive, and kinetic. It wants to dive into projects and relationships head first. It doesn't care if the outcome is pretty, as long as the process is thrilling. Expect tests of courage and candor during this time. In Aries, Venus wants what it wants on its own terms. When it enters Pisces, March 27th to April 30th, it gets to cool off and reflect on the things that it stirred up. In Pisces, Venus is exceptionally resourced and comfortable. There's no need to prove or define itself. This is an excellent time to offer and receive forgiveness and drop into any feelings that were glossed over during that more aggressive time in Aries. In Pisces, Venus just wants to heal, indulge, and love. The only problem is it might want peace so much that it'll agree to anything. Expect some emotional and mental whiplash as the planets move back and forth between these two signs. Finally, the fact that all of this happens across 0 degrees of Aries, which is the genesis point of the entire zodiac. Again, think of the birth of Venus, Botticelli's Birth of Venus, the emergence of this human form from the sea. Like it doesn't, that 0 degrees Aries point usually speaks to things that seem like unprecedented. Like, what the fuck is that? Where did that come from? It's almost like spontaneous. Oh, there's a story in the Bible, like immaculate, immaculate conception. Where the fuck did this come from? I like you can't really trace the history of it, right? Just like an emergence. Sorry. It's the genesis point of the entire zodiac. It speaks to climactic endings and beginnings, much like the eclipses that accompany this tumultuous time. The Aries point, as 0 degrees Aries is also called, is the threshold of individual emergence from the great Piscean sea of all that is. Both the Aries point and eclipses can be experienced as uncontrollable outrushes of energy, like a cosmic birth contraction. This spring, we'll be wrestling with our thirst for unity and the antisocial aspects of our nature. We'll get to practice letting go of comforting illusions and boldly confronting our desire for something new. And that's the end of that. But I want to talk about this something new. I'm almost done. So we have Venus and Mercury going back and forth over this Aries point, this critical degree. I would really pay attention to the things that pop up in March and April as Mercury and Venus are doing that. Neptune crosses. It will go back eventually, but it makes its first little poke into Aries March 30th. And then, like sometime in May, Saturn, which is in Pisces right now, is going to do the same thing. It's going to go over that Aries point, and then it'll eventually go back in the fall. But once we come to February of 2026, Neptune and Saturn are going to exactly conjoin exactly on that Aries point. That Aries point is hot, hot, hot. There is something brand new, brand new. It's like, like that what the fuck kind of moment. Like, where did this come from? Just odd. It would be like if I'm trying to find something like totally outrageous, and it's harder and harder to come up with things that seem really outrageous. If your home, and I was gonna say like, and a meteor fell through your roof, but that's on the bingo card now, right? Too. Um, I can't think of anything so outrageous that you would just be dumbfounded right now. But anyway, something like that. Um, it's a whole, I'm going to use another bad pun again, a sea change, the turning of the tide. Um, this is something major. And so that's it's a big one, that Saturn Neptune conjunction at 0 Aries. But because we have so much going on that zero Aries point right now, I think if you're paying attention, you'll be able to catch a glimpse of what's really going to land in your living room or somewhere else unexpected this spring. So I would pay attention to that. And, it's a great time to start, I don't know, journaling. Especially if you have monkey mind right now, it's hard to like gather your thoughts. We're very distracted. Our minds are jumping around all over the place. If you have a practice of jotting some things down every day about, where your mind went when you looking back, right? That's a retrograde process. We're going to have Mercury in retrograde just to make everything more interesting. Upon looking back, you might be able to connect some dots and just maybe get a little bit of a handle on where you're at if you can't quite assess where you're at in the moment. I could say about 10,000 more things about this period coming up. And it's like whacking me right on my sun. So, for those of you who do practice astrology, that last week of March is that looks like just, again, struggling with words, but like that's when my birthday is, so just imagine my solar return chart. That's going to be wacky. Whatever. um am I prepared? No, I'm in Aries. I'm just what can anyone do right now except be aware, pay attention, and stay very flexible. I would not latch on to anything right now. I think that's the best advice I can give. And I know it's exhausting to pay attention. It's exhausting to be in relationship with these things on any kind of regular basis. Take a break, come back. Because if you're paying attention when the meteor does drop into your living room or whatever the thing is or multiple things are, you will be able to take some kind of action that is based on you being aware of what's going on around you. Not on social media, not on the news. These are all performances. Like, who are you around? What are they doing? Okay, now I'm speaking in the voice of Aries. Aries does not give a fuck about, your like platitudes and ideas and what you think you're going to do, what you say, what you're planning to do. It wants to know what you are physically doing right now. It doesn't care about what you believe in, right? We all, everyone, going back to the beginning of the show, you know, I know when people announce things and say things and talk about their convictions, almost sort of like a mantra. This is what I believe. This is wrong. This is right. Again, as my dear friend Mandy has been saying, take all of that with a mouthful of salt. What are people doing? Where are they putting their bodies? What are the actions that they're taking? Those are things you can, I think, take to the bank. But what people are saying and, expressing over, social media, the memes they're sharing, the again, the platitudes that they're espousing. And this is anybody, like whether they have a lot of power or they have no power, like experience who what do you, what are the actions, because that's what Aries is all about. What are you doing? What actions are you taking or not taking? It doesn't even matter why, because the action itself will tell you so much about the people that you're around. And in the larger scheme of things, with so much going on that we don't have direct control over, just see who's being affected in a material way. Again, this is not ideology and not by organizing people according to different social constructs. I think that just makes things more confusing. But the flesh and blood bodies that how are they being affected by what's around them? The powers that be, the people that you're in contact with, what are they actually doing? Talk is very cheap right now, and it's very loud, unfortunately. Turn the volume down and experience and try to build your capacity to have more of those experiences, because that's where the real information is. And I will leave you with that. And, good luck this March. And I will see you next time.